It's time for the news.
The Zionist forces have carried out a preemptive strike against Iran, killing several people, including Commander-in-Chief of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Hossein Salami, and two other senior officials. Iran's defense ministry has strongly condemned the Zionist army attacks on Iran civilian and military positions, stating that its forces are ready to inflict a severe and exemplary punishment on the Zionist enemy. The United Nations General Assembly has adopted by overwhelming majority a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and immediate access for the population to large-scale humanitarian aid. And the Zionist occupation forces forced Palestinian worshippers to leave the Al-Aqsa Mosque in occupied Al-Quds after dawn prayers, prohibiting them from remaining inside before closing all its doors. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail from Radio Algeria International. Good afternoon. First in our news, the Zionist forces have carried out a preemptive strike against Iran, declaring a special state of emergency throughout the country. Iranian state television Irib TV reported that loud explosions were heard early Friday in areas of the Iranian capital, Tehran, the source of which has not yet been determined. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio denied any U.S. involvement or assistance in the attack. Iran has closed its airspace following the attack launched by the Zionist entity on Friday against its country, Iranian state television reported. Explosions were reported in Tehran and in the cities of Nanats, Hondab, and Khorramshahr. The television said, adding that numerous casualties, including women and children, had been reported in a residential building in Tehran. The commander-in-chief of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, Hossein Salami, and two other senior officials were killed as a result of the airstrikes, the official IRNA news agency reported. The Zionist airstrikes also killed two Iranian nuclear scientists, according to the agency. And Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei has affirmed that the crime committed by the Zionist entity revealed its evil nature and promised a firm response from the Iranian army. The Iranian news agency IRNA quoted a statement issued by the Iranian supreme leader to the people in which he explained that the bloody hand of the Zionist entity had struck residential areas, promising severe punishment. He mentioned that a number of Iranian leaders and scholars had died as a result of the Zionist entity's aggression on the Iranian capital, Tehran, noting that their deputies and colleagues would resume their duties immediately. Ali Khamenei concluded by emphasizing that the Zionist entity has prepared a bitter and painful fate for itself with this crime, and it will certainly receive it. And the Iranian Ministry of Defense has strongly condemned the Zionist army attack on Iranian civilian and military positions at dawn on Friday, stating that its forces are ready to inflict a severe and exemplary punishment on the Zionist enemy. In a statement released early on Friday, Iranian diplomats described the Zionist entity's attacks as a blatant violation of UN charters and a clear aggression against the country's territorial integrity and sovereignty, asserting that Iran will respond with all necessary means. As a reminder, at least 50 people, including women and children, were injured in the Zionist attack targeting several positions in Iran, according to Iranian state television. And the Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs had described the Zionist army's attack on several Iranian civilians' positions on Friday night as a blatant violation of UN charters and a clear aggression against the country's territorial integrity and sovereignty, stating that Iran will respond with all necessary means. The Iranian Foreign Ministry wrote in a message relayed on Friday by the Iranian news agency IRNA that Iran was unjustly targeted by the aggression of a criminal and evil regime which violated its territorial integrity and national sovereignty by attacking several residential areas in Tehran and other cities across the country. These strikes resulted in the deaths of several servants of the homeland, defenders of national honor, scientists, and technology experts, as well as many innocent people. The message added that, as a founding member of the United Nations, whose primary mission is to prevent aggression, preserve peace, and counter threats to international security, Iran calls on the Security Council to immediately assume its responsibilities and intervene without delay in response to this blatant violation of international peace and security by the Zionist regime. Finally, the ministry called on all UN member states, particularly countries in the region, Islamic states, members of the non-aligned movement, and all nations concerned with peace and security to strongly condemn this criminal aggression and to take urgent and collective measures to address this dangerous adventure, which undoubtedly constitutes an unprecedented threat to global peace and security. And the Arab League has condemned the Zionist entity's attack on Iranian territory, stressing that it is a blatant violation of international law. In a statement, the Arab League's General Secretariat called for decisive and immediate intervention by the international community to stop the Zionist entity's aggression, which threatens to ignite the region, stressing the need to prevent the situation from spiraling out of control. Meanwhile, Donald Trump, or U.S. President Donald Trump, told the press that the United States, of course, supports Israel and called the strikes on Iran overnight a very successful attack. The president warned Iran earlier on Friday to agree to a nuclear deal before there is nothing left, suggesting, as he put it, in a social media post that subsequent Israeli attacks on the country will be even more brutal. The post marked Trump's first public comment since Israel launched strikes on Iran, targeting its nuclear program and military leaders, with the U.S. president saying he had tried to steer Iranian leaders towards diplomacy, but they failed to act at great cost. And the United Nations General Assembly has adopted a majority, or by an overwhelming majority, a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and immediate access for the population to large-scale humanitarian aid. Saad Bouazi has more details in this report.
The resolution called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and for all necessary measures to be taken to put pressure on the Zionist entity. The text, adopted by 149 votes to 12 with 19 abstentions, demands an immediate, unconditional and permanent ceasefire in Gaza and the release of the hostages. The resolution demands that the Zionist entity, the occupying power, immediately end the blockade, open all crossing points, and allow the distribution of humanitarian aid in sufficient quantity throughout the Palestinian territory, where the situation is disastrous after more than 20 months of aggression. It also strongly condemns any use of famine against civilians as a method of warfare and the unlawful denial of humanitarian access. To enforce the principle of accountability, the draft resolution also calls on all states to individually and collectively take all necessary measures to ensure that the Zionist entity complies with its obligations under international law. A few days before an international UN conference on the Palestinian question, the text also reiterates the Assembly's unwavering commitment to a two-state solution.
And several NGOs have said in Paris, ahead of the New York conference on the two-state solution scheduled from the 17th to 21st of June at the UN headquarters, that the recognition of a Palestinian state is essential but must not remain symbolic. It must be given the means to exist. What Palestinian states are we talking about if the situation continues to be as it is, with Gaza on one side, which they are trying to destroy, and on the other side, the West Bank, where there are between 600,000 and 700,000 settlers, asked Sarah Lecoq, advocacy officer at CCFD Terre Solidaire, during a press conference. NGOs are calling for concrete measures, an end to the total siege of the Gaza Strip, an immediate and permanent ceasefire, immediate and unhindered access for humanitarian aid to Gaza, and of course the release of hostages, said Pierre Martin of the Platform of French NGOs for Palestine. Zionist occupation forces forced Palestinian worshippers to leave the Al-Aqsa Mosque in occupied Al-Quds after dawn prayers, prohibiting them from remaining inside before closing all the doors, the Wafa news agency reported today. According to local sources cited by Wafa, Zionist occupation forces stormed Al-Aqsa Mosque after dawn prayers, expelling worshippers before locking the doors, adding that this is the first time since the COVID-19 pandemic that the occupation has completely emptied the mosque of its worshippers and closed its doors. The closure coincides with the Zionist army's announcement of a total blockade imposed on the entire occupied West Bank. And the A3 Plus group at the UN Security Council has affirmed in New York that an inclusive political solution remains the only way to guarantee lasting security and stability in Yemen, calling on all the parties to demonstrate a genuine commitment to dialogue. Jamal Salmani has more details.
In a statement read out by the permanent representative of Somalia to the United Nations, Abukar Dahir Osman, during a briefing in the Security Council on the situation in Yemen, the A3 Plus group made up of Algeria, Sierra Leone, Somalia and Guyana expressed its full support for the efforts of the UN Secretary General's Special Envoy for Yemen, Hans Grundenberg, and his team in favor of a political process led and controlled by the Yemenis themselves, affirming that the inclusive political solution remains the only way to guarantee lasting security and stability in Yemen. The A3 Plus also expressed their deep concern at the deterioration of the security situation in Yemen and throughout the region, recalling that international humanitarian law prohibits attacks on civilians and their property. They also urged all parties to respect their commitments under international humanitarian law, including the Fourth Geneva Convention, as well as all customary principles, and to take the necessary measures to protect the civilian population in Yemen and spare them further tragedy.
The A3 Plus members expressed deep concern over the fragile and deteriorating security situation in Yemen and the wider region, recalling that international humanitarian law unequivocally prohibits attacks against civilian objects. The A3 Plus emphasized the urgent need to prevent the militarization of populated neighborhoods and to protect civilian infrastructure from harm and destruction. The group reiterates the urgent need for coordinated effort to de-escalate tensions and protect civilians, and urge all parties to uphold their obligation under international humanitarian law, including the Fourth Geneva Convention and customary principles, and to take necessary measures to protect civilian populations in Yemen from further harm.
The group also expressed its deep concern at the deterioration of the humanitarian aid health situation in Yemen and the proliferation of diseases such as malaria, fever, and cholera, with hundreds of new cases being reported in various provinces of the country, further damaging the health system. After calling on international organizations to contribute more to helping the people of Yemen, the A3 Plus group urged the authorities to take the necessary steps to ensure the timely delivery of humanitarian aid and life-saving supplies. The A3 Plus urged the Security Council to continue to work together for the sovereignty, territorial integrity and stability of Yemen.
And coming back to Algeria, where Algeria has acceded to the agreement on the creation of the Global Green Growth Institute signed in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil in June 2012, according to a presidential decree published in the official Gazette number 35. Based in Seoul, South Korea, this institute aims to promote the sustainable development of developing and emerging countries, as well as the least developed countries, through the dissemination of a new economic growth paradigm, namely green growth, poverty reduction, job creation, and social inclusion, and by improving economic, environmental, and social conditions in these countries through partnerships, according to the text of the agreement. And the ambassador of the European Union to Algiers, Diego Melado Pasqua, has called on Algiers for the best possible use to be made of the available resources and potential of the European Union and Algeria to strengthen trade relations between the two parties. In a statement to the press on the sidelines of a meeting organized by the Algerian Trade and Social Investment Organization, with the participation of Algerian and Spanish businessmen and representatives of the Barcelona Port Authority, the EU ambassador said that this meeting testifies to the solidity of trade relations between Algeria and Europe, highlighting the existing potential on both shores of the Mediterranean, notably the logistics facilities of the Port of Barcelona, which were presented on this occasion. With this, we come to the end of this news bulletin for today. Time now for our weekly program, the International Event of the Week. I'll leave you with that, and I'll meet you again tomorrow for a fresh edition of our news bulletin. Thank you and goodbye.
The International Event of the Week.
The U.S. State Department announced this week that it will impose sanctions on 4 judges at the International Criminal Court, ICC, for what it called the illegitimate and baseless actions targeting of the United States and its allies. The announcement was made by the U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who described the ICC as politicized, saying that it falsely claims unfettered discretion to investigate nationals of the U.S. and its allies. In a statement, ICC deplored the sanctions, providing for a freeze on the property and interest of the 4 judges, denouncing the measure as a clear attempt to undermine the court's independence. The U.S. sanctions are in response